Welcome to another episode of the Marriage Mentor Podcast with Eric and Jolene Engel, where Eric and Jolene answer marriage questions for believers, looking at the root of the problem instead of the symptom, always while applying God's wisdom and word for a Christ-centered marriage.
Okay, phones off, kids in bed. It's time for the Marriage Mentor Podcast with my beautiful wife, Jolene, and I'm Eric Engel. Hey, what do we got today?
Today we have a different approach. Every now and then we take more of a preventative teaching slant to the podcast. Oftentimes we answer marital concerns or problems. And although I like to give the listener an opportunity for, hey, how can we prevent this problem in those podcast episodes? Today we're just going straight to, let's not do this, okay? Let's ward off these problems before they come to a head in our marriage. So today's show is titled 2 Ways a Couple Could Snuff Out Their Love and Romance. And I got to tell you, I see it all the time.
Snuff out their love and their romance.
That's right. That's my gentle way of putting it.
Okay. All right. So 2 ways. Obviously you had 2 ways in mind. I mean, there's more than 2 ways, obviously.
Yes, but
right?
Those other 555 ways could be in several other podcast episodes.
Okay. Excellent. So what are your 2 ways?
The first way is by, for example, the wife acting like she is the parent of her husband, or vice versa. The husband acting like he is his wife's parent. Yeah, there ain't no sex happening in that marriage very often.
So we see that happen often, don't we?
We do.
And, it's funny because we see it both ways. Now, I don't know what your take is on it. If you see it more from the woman towards the man or the man towards the woman. Do you think one is more than the other?
No, I think they're even across the board, and it's full-blown cringeworthy when I see it, because it's just like, really? Don't act like her dad. Don't act like his mom. I mean, that right there is just a recipe for a platonic marriage amongst other issues. Okay?
Right. Well, we probably talked about this before, but I got a story, and you know which one.
Does it include a banana?
It does include a banana.
Yes, that's a story that I've heard that you've used many times, and that happened, probably 15 years ago.
Well, look, I only have so many stories. My life's not very, very exciting anymore, so you got to bear with me with the only 5 stories I got. But that's one of them.
You got more than 5, but anyways.
So let's talk about this problem. I mean, first of all, the guy and the gal, they get married.
Right.
Okay. Normally, do they have that problem when they're dating?
Of course not. There's no way on this God's green earth that single woman is momming him on a date. Okay? Because the date would be, at some point, the man would be like, yeah, there's no spark there.
And she's not looking for a daddy on the date?
She's looking for provision and protection, but she's looking to be loved. She's looking for attention, but not a daddy attention. Okay. She's looking for a chemistry, a spark. Okay,
so for those of you who are not married yet, if you are looking for a daddy or a mommy, you better change your relationship right now.
Yeah, that's not a good thing. I mean, it's one thing to admire, maybe your dad and how he treated your mom and vice versa, but it's another thing to kind of crave that affection. I mean, I wasn't raised with an affectionate father. He was a very emotionally distant dad. There was no relationship there, but I didn't look to replace that.
You didn't want that lack of emotion?
Well, I didn't feel, I let God be God. Does that make sense? That it's just
Right.
like, this was the family, the Lord put me in, but it's my relationship with the Lord that trumps everything else. And so that obviously had to be healthy in spite of my earthly relationship with my parents.
Okay. So let's go a little deeper and talk about maybe just some examples. I mean, when you talk, I mean, it's a pretty simple concept. To act like their parent.
Right.
Now, a lot of times you'll have a more aggressive, or what I want to say, a domineering type of guy with a more passive type of gal.
Right.
And a lot of times that he'll take on that role of just telling her, look, you need to do this, you need to do that. I want this done by the time I get home, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Or
And I have to laugh because he doesn't realize how that just removes really that feminine sexual side to a wife.
the romance.
Absolutely. He just puts her in like slave mode, you know?
Okay. And then there's the other side where the guy could probably take care of himself, but now she comes along and she tells him how he should do this or that, how he should make his sandwich, how he should, or maybe, I don't know, how he should put on his shoes or how he should.
How he should dress.
Right.
Everything. Down to the point of how he should drive.
Right.
You know, but that's another one. I mean, that's because you're the wife is in there as the passenger. And so I say that lightly, you know, how he should drive, because we talk about backseat drivers, you know,
Right.
but really what it comes down to is, how did you feel he drove when you were dating? You know, I mean, there's times I've said to you, I'm not driving with you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, right. And, you know, there's nothing that destroys that spark, that romance, that relationship more than dating your mother. I mean, I don't want to date my mother.
Right.
Obviously, you don't want to date your father.
No.
Okay.
No.
But couples seem to think that's, and a lot of times here you'll have maybe a more domineering type of gal with a more passive type of guy, and he just kind of sits into, you know, whatever she tells me to do that makes her happy. I'll just let her tell me, and I won't fight it or anything like that.
But he feels emasculated in the process. She feels bitter because now she's carrying all the responsibility.
Well, okay. Even if he doesn't feel emasculated, I'd have to say right now, men, if you're listening right now, you should feel emasculated.
Okay.
Okay? I mean, get some guts and be a man.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, a real simple example. I'm going to share my story, but we were on a trip at one point, and it was some other couples on this trip as well. And the wife says to the husband, before we headed out to do our activity, his name, she says, "Oh, you need to eat a banana." Okay? And I think he was so used to being told what to do that he just fell in line. It's like, okay. Okay? Now that was like a dart to between my eyes for me. It was just like, are you kidding me? You know, I know how to eat a banana. I know when I need to eat something, and I know when I need to go to the bathroom. I know when I need to do things. You know, I'm a big boy. And I think I said to you.
Oh, no. At that point, you hadn't.
I hadn't?
You hadn't said that to me at that point. Now that I think about it, here's the story, because we were just married this past week. 21 years was our wedding anniversary. And on this trip, we had gone with a bunch of couples, and it happened to be our 5th wedding anniversary. So it's been 17 years. And our kids were really, really little, and we're in mommy mode 24/7. And I may have been in the kitchen when that was spoken. And I may have even looked at you like, are you kidding me?
Do we look across the room?
Right. And I thought, there ain't no way I would ever say that to you.
I was probably cross-eyed at that point.
Right. It was a sucker punch.
Now, I realize, let's say he's 100 years old and he's senile.
Right.
That might be something different.
Right.
Okay.
You need your insulin, hon. That's a little bit different than you need to eat a banana. And I'm over there just thinking, there's no way I would want to move into that position to mother you, because I know that the flame would be snuffed out.
Right. And being the personality I am, it's just like, I don't like being told what to do to begin with.
Right. Neither one of us does.
Let alone my wife telling me when I need to eat or what I need to do.
Well, it's funny because the weekend continued, and do you want to share this or you want me to share it?
You go ahead and tell it.
Okay. The weekend continued, and I'm not participating in some of the extracurricular activities just because based on the weather and based on my health. So I stood back and stayed in the condo, and then you had gone off, with this couple and spent the day, and then you came home, and then all of us went out to dinner. Now, we're in this large vehicle that seats many, and there's one couple up front, they're doing the driving, and then you and the husband of this wife are in the middle row of this vehicle, and this wife and I are in the back seat. Okay? And I don't know what has transpired throughout the day with you.
Earlier in the day.
I had no idea, because you just got home, it was snowing, it's rainy, it's just a mess, and we all just kind of piled into the vehicle and went to dinner. So I know no stories. Okay? But I'm in the back seat, and you're in the seat right in front of me. I'm directly behind you. And this wife pokes my shoulder, and I turn, and she's basically speaking in sign language at this point, motioning. She's not speaking out loud. Now, I don't know sign language, but she's motioning to me these things that should be taking place. And so she pokes me, and I turn and I look at her, and then she tells me in no words that basically you need to put on your seatbelt. Okay?
Right.
And I see that your seatbelt's not on because I'm directly behind you, and I can see that the seatbelt clasp is still up top. And I turned to her, again, mind you, not knowing any stories that day, and I said out loud, okay, there's no sign language on my part. I said, he's a grown man. If he wants to put on the seatbelt, he'll put on the seatbelt. Okay? That was my response. Mm-hmm. So what happened earlier in the day, love?
Well, earlier in the day, I was riding in the front seat, and she proceeded to tell me that I needed to put on my seatbelt. Okay? And I looked around and checked myself and realized that I was a grown man. And I think I probably told her that, I don't feel the need to put on a seatbelt, okay? Because I'm an adult, her husband is not going to get a ticket for me.
Right.
If
this is long before we had those laws in California.
Right, but if we get pulled over, I'm the one that's getting the ticket.
Right.
And I'm taking the chance. And so basically she was parenting her husband that morning. And parenting me.
Then she was parenting my husband that afternoon, and then parenting me that evening.
Right.
Okay. So what we need to remember as wives is whatever children that God has given you, you have the responsibility to parent them, and only them. Okay? I don't have the responsibility to parent my husband. God has not given me that responsibility, nor do I want it. Now, when we do act like that, because every now and then we will say to each other something along those lines, and we've just kind of learned, we'll both say, you're not my dad, or you'll say, you're not my mother. And it's just a quick way to kind of like put us back into the role that we have as husband and wife.
Well, and I'd have to say this, gals, if you really want to turn your husband on, encourage his masculinity.
Right.
Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that you encourage him to be dangerous or sinful.
Act like a fool.
Right. But still, sometimes we want to just go out and, I don't know, run in the mud or whatever we're doing. It's just like, if I have a wife that says, hey, go do that. You're a man, go do that. I'll give you another example. Okay?
I know what it is.
None
of this is scripted either.
It's not scripted, but we were at our first place, our first house that we bought, and I had some fruit trees, some orange trees out there, and the rats were getting up in my tree and eating the oranges, so I think I put some poison out there, and one night, it's about 11 o'clock at night, and I'm looking out there seeing if there are any rats like running up the tree or anything. Well, I see what looks like a large rat, which was not a rat, but it was a possum. And that thing was in our yard or up the tree. I don't remember exactly where it was. And I said, and I know it's 11 o'clock at night, and I said, there's a possum out there. And you said to me, now, look, as a guy, I see something like that. It's in my domain. I want to kill it. Now, if you guys don't hunt or whatever, that's fine. But, I'm one of those guys. I see it. I want to kill it, right? But I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, well, I got my wife here and I'll just leave it go. And you looked at me, you said something like, what are you waiting for? Go kill it.
Right. I said, don't just stand there. Go kill it.
Right. At which point I grabbed a pellet gun that I have, and I think I put on your slippers because I couldn't find mine. And I headed out there to shoot this thing. And at the same time, I think you found my flip-flops, and you're out there in my flip-flops right behind me. Hey, right. Guys, I mean, what a turn on. Your wife is right behind you, encouraging you to be a man. I mean, I just love that, And we did take care of the possum and such, but the story is better than taking care of it. I mean, the story was fantastic, and that's one of the. How long ago was that? I mean,
we didn't have kids, so that was
20 years ago.
Yeah, over 20 years ago.
Okay, I still remember that. That's still one of those things that encourages me, that makes me feel warm about you, because you were encouraging me to be who I was. Now, it doesn't mean that a guy has to be a hunter or whatever, but whoever he is, if he's got a gal that's encouraging him to be who he is, as long as it's not sinful,
right? It's
not putting her in danger, okay? I mean, go for it.
So really what the wife needs to learn is, what is the difference between encouraging him, helping him, and mothering him? Because they're all very different.
Okay.
I mean, because mine was really almost like a command. I mean, you would have thought me saying, what are you waiting for? Don't just stand there, go kill it. Right. Would have been like, you need to eat a banana. How is that different? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well,
how does a wife listening to this really discern the difference between, but wait a minute, I'm called to be his helper, because the Bible does say that.
I'll tell you the difference. Here's the difference. Let's say that I wanted to eat a banana a day. Mm-hmm. Okay? I told you, hey, but for health benefits or whatever, I need to eat a banana every morning. Okay? Can you help me remember to do that?
Right.
Okay? Now, that's different. Now you're being a helper. You're not being my mother. Okay? But if I didn't ask for it, then I don't need you telling me what I need to do. Okay? So in that instance, you knew who I was.
Right.
Okay? You weren't mothering me to go take care of this animal. You knew who I was. As a matter of fact, I was probably like a dog looking out the window at this thing, like, I want to kill that thing. I want to kill that thing. And you knew who I was. And so you encouraged me to be who I was.
So her really kind of studying her husband will help her, because we have our younger son that would never, ever cross his mind. He would never go do something like that. So, obviously he'll need a wife that isn't as aggressive, to where it almost seems like she's more of the masculine one. It's
which is fine.
Right.
All she needs to do is learn who he is.
Right.
And encourage him to be who he is, who God made him to be.
Right.
When you got a gal like that will encourage you to be who God made you to be, I mean, that's just a fantastic thing. Rather than trying to turn you or mold you or shape you into someone God did not make you to be.
Right.
That's, that's more what a mother does. And it's fine with kids.
Well, we're biblically commanded to do that. I mean, we do shape our kids. And the difference is we shape a child, we influence a husband. And so a wife has to remember that it's not the same. You're in a different position. There is a biblical mandate to shape that child. But so often we get lost in being the helper across the board, and then we start trying to shape our husbands. And it's just like that position, that lowercase h that is in Genesis, that is not uppercase H that's reserved for the Holy Spirit. Uppercase H in Scripture talks about the helper, the Holy Spirit. Lowercase h is the helper, the comparable one, the complement that we are to our husbands.
So you have to be able to define the difference between helping and mothering.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go the other side. A lot of guys, especially the dominant personalities, they just want people to fall in line. Okay, and they marry a gal and they expect her to just fall in line. Hey, I want you to do this, 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 and this. More like she's an assistant or a secretary or an employee. Hey, I pay you, so you need to do this.
Right. I knew one wife, and I just like, I'm sure my mouth just like dropped open for I don't know how long when I heard this, but we were out doing some activity that day with the kids, and she told me that her husband said to her, while he's gone, she needs to get on that treadmill for so long that day. And I had heard another husband who told his wife that she needs to do lunges. That it was just like, what in your right mind? I mean, who are these men? I mean, I was just floored to hear these things. That it's just like, so wait a minute. You're now my dad. Okay? If you had said that garbage to me, I'd have been like, go pound sand. There ain't no way I'm doing any of that.
Here's exactly what you would have said to me. If I would have said you need to go run on the treadmill, you would have said you need to shut up.
Right. I mean, I would just been so belligerent to hear you and indignant, totally indignant, that it's just like, I'm sorry, you're talking to the wrong gal. The last time I checked, and let me look at my finger, I have a wedding ring on it, and I'm your wife, not your daughter, not your slave, your whatever, fill in the blank.
Okay, well, as a husband, see, there is a difference between commanding and leading.
Right.
And the problem is a lot of husbands say, well, I'm the head of the home, and so you need to do what I say, right?
Right.
That's not how it works. You're supposed to lead. You're supposed to treat her as Christ taught or treated the church. And what was that? I mean, he laid his life down for the church.
Right.
Right? No, he didn't sin. He didn't compromise or any of that sort of thing. But still, and by the way, Jesus wasn't walking around pointing his finger at people saying, do this or else.
Right. Well, he was a shepherd leader.
Right.
And that's what every husband should strive for, in spite of whether they have a dominant or a passive personality.
Right. Well, the sheep follow the shepherd.
Right.
He doesn't walk behind them and try to herd them. They follow him because he leads. So, let's say that you want your wife to, you think she needs to run, some laps or whatever. Okay. First of all, number one, you better be doing twice as many laps as she's doing. Number one. And number two, you better wait till she says, hey, I'd like to join you.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And
He can encourage because,
sure.
There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, do you want to go take a walk? Hey, do you want to go for a run? Well, here's a perfect example. Just last week, I'm out running on a regular basis. You're out running on a regular basis. And then one Monday morning rolls around and it's just like, I'm not running. I'm sick and tired of running. And you're like, come on, let's go. And I'm like, no, I'm not going, because I don't have this sense of you're parenting me. I know you're trying to encourage me. And it's just like, no, I'm tired. I don't feel like going. Well, I finally decide, okay, yeah, I'm going to go. Okay.
Right.
But it was my decision.
Well, did I keep on you and say,
No.
come on?
No.
It's like, you
but
don't
it was
want to go.
my decision.
You don't want to go.
You tried to encourage, and I'm like, you'd encourage me all day long, but I'm not coming. And then I make up my mind. Okay, I'm coming. Okay, but it was my decision. That's what it comes back to is you weren't nagging, just like how we wouldn't encourage a wife to nag. That's just like you get nowhere with nagging. If anything, they're going to dig their heels in even more. I know I would. If you started nagging me, la, 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 I'm not listening. Okay? Because it's not you're not hearing the whole picture or seeing the whole picture when the nagging's like kind of taking place, in my opinion, from a woman's perspective. That's just like, oh, he only wants to have his way.
Okay. So then what's the second way?
Okay, so let me remind them the first way is by treating your spouse like that you're their parent. So don't mom or dad one another.
That's how you can snuff out the love and romance.
Right.
Okay.
And the other way is when you only act as parents. Okay? Because so often you just stay in the parent mode. You never get out of parent mode.
So here is the world's new identity is
Yes.
that the world is, it's all about the children.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and I had a gal once say, well, when I was a kid, I had my chance, and now it's their time. Okay, well, it isn't. Number one, it's not their time. They're a blessing to the parents, not the other way around. Now, I'll do anything for my kids, but that is not my identity.
Right.
And it should never be. And I don't know if you'd say it's more, a lot of times it's more the mom's identity than it is the husband's or
hands
the
down.
father's.
Hands down.
But either way, your identity cannot be as the parent of the kids. The marriage comes first.
Right. Right. Well, when the marriage is all about the kids, and kids, man, they just do. They suck the life out of you. I mean, we just had last week, the week, of our anniversary. That's just like our kid comes home. Oh, I think my finger's broken. The next thing you know, we're at urgent care and taking care of a broken finger. That's just like, really? We got to deal with this now? And he's 19. So
Right.
he's not 4, where it's no longer, a dislocated elbow but there's always something. There's always something with the kids, and they're kids. We raise them up, but you have to make sure that you don't lose sight of the marriage in the midst of the parenting.
So how do you keep from changing that focus? Because let's face it, they show up and they're squawking all the time. Okay, they're squawking all the time, and they need something.
Yes.
Right. And you might think, well, my husband, he can kind of take care of himself, so I gotta tend to this one or these.
In my early years of being a mom, wow, they were very difficult. They were exhausting physically. You never had a second. I felt like I never had a second to myself. And
Well, you don't. I mean, as a mom, you go into the restroom and you see the little fingers come under the door. Mommy, are you in there?
I can remember thinking, woohoo, I get to go on a field trip all by myself because I have an appointment with the gynecologist. That it's just like, that's just horrible. That's just horrible to think that, okay, I have my yearly checkup that, I can't bring my kids. And so you do have to carve out time. You have to be intentional. You have to prioritize. And I'm a natural planner. That's in my bent. It's in my temperament, my personality. But that's not in every woman's personality. And so if they don't protect their investment of their marriage, they're going to end up with a broken marriage because they spent all this time tending to Johnny, because they always have needs. Those kids always have needs. You have to be able to say, you know what? You're not bleeding from your eyes. You're okay.
Well, and it's not just because they have needs. A lot of times they've been hurt by their husband.
Oh, sure.
And so it's easy just to retreat from that and to pour into your little ones because, for the most part, until they get to be teenagers, they're appreciative and they're
but still, there could still be times when my kids are in a more of an emotionally safe place than if I were to look at you between husband and wife, because you could hurt my heart, okay, or you could not give enough. And my kids and we have a totally different relationship. We could certainly I could certainly put all my time and efforts into them and feel emotionally closer to them and emotionally safer.
Right.
Okay. So whether they're 3, 10, or 17 and 19, like my kids are, that it's still a very easy way for a wife to feel emotional closeness and intimacy with other human beings that are a safer place for her emotionally than her husband.
So let's talk about some practical ways of practicing that for each other. I know one way that you did it for me, which is really simple, but at mealtime, when the kids are like, I'm hungry, and I, reaching for this or that on the table, it's like you would say, your father gets served first.
Right.
That was a way that you showed me that, hey, you come before the kids.
Yes, and I was also teaching them the biblical order of the home. Because what do they understand at age 1? Nothing. They understand nothing, and 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, again, I'm showing them a representation of what a Christian marriage looks like and what a Christian family looks like. The only way they're going to learn that is by what we do in the home.
Right.
And, to be able to say, no, I'm going to go talk to your dad, or you're going to have to talk to your dad about this. They know, hands down. Even today, my kids' age, one of them said, well, I don't want to talk to daddy because he's going to say this, and I didn't want to share it with you, and, because you and him are one. And I said, and they said, and he's the head of the home. And I said, well, who do you think influences the head? I do. Okay. So they bring in that viewpoint of whatever really the mother has spent time teaching them, and what is of value to her.
Okay. So let's look at the other side. You've been with the kids all day long. I come home, daddy, 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 daddy.
Yep.
Okay. And you're exhausted, and you probably want to talk to an adult,
right,
rather than kids all day. Okay. How can I, as a husband, although I know this answer, but I want you to answer it. How can I, as a husband, put you first before the kids in that situation?
Well, you used to tell them, let me hug and kiss mommy first, because they're now clinging to you and your legs.
Right.
And you would also tell them, okay, I'll talk to you after I talk to mommy. Because we would establish just some time on the couch. It might be 5 minutes, it might be 20 minutes, depending on their age. Or depending on your husband's job, it would be like, hey, allow your husband to come home, maybe go change his clothes. I know I have a friend whose husband does manual labor. So he comes home as a grease monkey. Okay, he ain't going to be sitting on no couch talking to his wife until he gets out of the shower. Right. So a lot of it is just dependent on, what is your husband's profession? Does he need to have like maybe 5 or 10 minutes to decompress when he gets home? And then does he turn to you? Because a lot of marriages, the husband's coming home, but they're not turning to each other after they've, come home from the workplace. They dive right back into their responsibilities. And then you wonder why the relationship is, so distant.
Right. And, we don't do this. I won't disparage others that do, but I've seen some people where they call each other mama and papa, right?
Mom and dad.
But they refer to each other that way.
Right.
Okay. For us, that ain't going to work, because all of a sudden that changes our relationship, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was interesting because when I had my firstborn and I started to see that, I remember turning to you at one point and saying, don't ever call me that. Because for me, it tears off the label of wife. And I knew that I needed to keep wifehood at the forefront, because if the marriage isn't at the forefront, then the family will eventually break down. I mean, when I look at on our wedding invitations, it's got the Song of Solomon, verse 3-4 on that. I found the one I love. I held him and would not let him go. So I didn't ever want to lose our love affair. And it's very easy to have parenting cause that without these are great parents that want what's best for their kids, but what's best for their kids is for a husband and wife, a mother and father that love each other, for their kids to see that.
And right, to show it.
Right. So those would be my my two ways a couple could snuff out their love and romance is one, act like their parent, and two, only act as parents. You got to act like friends and lovers. The Bible's clear on that. There's biblical principles all throughout it about the husband, rendering to his wife the affection due to her, and likewise also to the wife to the husband. And obviously, when God made Adam and Eve, he didn't initially make them as parents. He made them as husband and wife. So keep the biblical priority, keep first things first.
Right. Well, and I would recommend that you sit down with your wife or you sit down with your husband after this and just ask, do I make you feel that way? Do I focus on the kids? Do I make you feel like I'm your mother or your father? And be open. Obviously you want to be gentle when you have this discussion.
Yeah, be open but not rude.
Right.
Well, I have to say that because sometimes when you do an exercise like this to better your marriage, sometimes people can't handle the constructive criticism. They immediately go into lashing out or shutting down. And that's not the point of the exercise. The point of the exercise is to get closer to each other,
right?
Not punch each other.
And the simple answer would be, well, I would really like if you did this first, or I would really like if you greeted me at the door before you're dealing with the kids, or I would really like if you spent time with me when you came home from work, etc. I mean, you need to communicate, and that's a whole nother podcast, but communication, it's really simple if you're kind to each other.
Right. But, trust has been broken, grudges have been held. So obviously that's another podcast as well. But the point is, make sure you're not, doing these parenting things in your marriage. And if you are, just, make an effort to say, yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore. Or, hon, I realize that I've done that. I'm going to work really hard to not do that. Show some humility because, even Eric and I we've parented each other over the course of our marriage because we naturally go into that role. We naturally go into, hey, you should do this. And it's just like, nope, don't want to hear it, and that might not be the intent. The intent might not be to parent, but it could feel that way. So you and I are really quick to say, no, don't cross that line. We
tend to give a lot of advice to a lot of people to begin with.
Right.
And a lot of times we tend to want to do that to each other. And it's not needed. It's not right. Look, you don't need my advice unless you ask for it.
Right. So sometimes even us, we will blur the line between encouraging and giving advice. And so what we try and do is ask the question instead. How would you feel about this? Or what do you think about that? Instead of kind of putting on them that they need to eat a banana. So those are my thoughts.
Well, at this point, it's a joke. If you told me, hey, you need to eat a banana, I'd probably say, well, you need to shut up.
Yeah.
But that would be in a loving, joking way.
Right.
So that's enough on that. We will touch on the other 998 ways in another podcast.
That a couple could snuff out their love and romance.
Yeah, snuff out. I love that that term.
Well, because think about it. There was a spark when we met, when we dated, when we got engaged, and I always want couples to be mindful of the spark. That's what caused you to enter into marriage. And we have to be very diligent to really, I go back to Song of Solomon 3:4. I found the one I love. So if I found you, here's the next one. It says, I held him and would not let him go. So do your best, wives, to keep holding on to him. And husbands, do your best to render the affection that is due to her, not just you want to have sex with her, but the affectionate side. Because you're responsible for keeping that spark lit. Nobody else is.
Right. Right.
So.
I'm Eric Engel.
And I'm Jolene Engel at joleneengel.com. Until next time.